just an unbelievable time. It was great. I wish you guys had better agents and you didn't have to leave Thursday night. So it's a shame.
It's funny because we have the same agent. That's what makes the joke really good.
This is actually true.
Tough scene for Josh.
Connor and I do have the same agent. Shout out to Josh Levy.
Makes the joke really good.
Right, exactly. Look, I mean, I think it goes to show, who Josh Levy likes and who Josh 100%.
Levy does
The
priority
not.
rankings are a little different.
We'll break down the Josh Levy power rankings and just where you are on the list.
It's very easy because you can slot me in towards the bottom, and you can slot you towards the top, and then fill out the middle.
Yeah, fill out the middle.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry and a very nicely dressed
Natalie
Jake
dress, I would say.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, exactly. Are all your New York Liberty sweatshirts in the wash? What happened?
I thought this was the Golf Channel
The Sauce
studio.
Gardner jersey is that dry cleaners?
Are we talking Hideki Matsuyama today?
Yeah.
Victor Hovland?
It just feels like he's either wearing a Sauce Gardner jersey,
Jersey.
or New York,
It's
or
really, let's not go too far.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're giving a lot of credit.
Doesn't really feel like officially licensed merchandise either.
It
feels like he bought it from a street vendor.
Like DH Gate.
Yeah, totally.
It's sickening that we all think that.
And like his New York Liberty hoodie.
Yeah.
Right. That's really it.
That's really it.
Yeah.
If you follow Jay on Instagram, as I do, you'll notice that most of his children, all they do is they wear like his hand-me-downs.
They wear
a random assortment of teams, and so and they're always big on them.
Yeah, well, the thing is that whenever I win a big bet on a team, I buy the merchandise of the team to commemorate it. So my 2-year-old's running around in Charlotte Hornets gear because LaMelo Ball went third in the draft a few years ago, and I bet on it. And that's how we operate.
It's got to be amazing when another parent asks you, like, "Oh, are you guys big Hornets fans?" And you explain that story to them of why your child is wearing Hornets gear.
No. I am not a fan of the Charlotte Hornets at all. I'm just a degenerate gambler.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Would your child like to come over for a play date? I can just
boy.
imagine how you are at the parent-teacher picnics.
Yeah, it's quite something. A lot of Hornets chat. Yeah.
I can only imagine. Anyway, I don't know why you're all dressed up. Did they make you dress up at the Golf Channel? I've never been on the Golf Channel. They've never asked me, so I wouldn't know.
You'll get there, I'm sure, at some point.
Maybe one day for you, Matthew. I asked to wear the New York Liberty hoodie on live from the PGA Championship, and they said no. So I'm dressed like this because I was on Golf Channel, and that's why I look like a Golf Channel person right now.
Quite the assortment of attire around this.
Well, I don't know what this is.
This is called getting close to Memorial Day. Is what this is called. Yeah. Very comfortable. Barry knows a thing or two about that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, listen, I'm comfy. We can stay here all day.
All right, let's get into the Roto World headlines here, and starting with a very interesting one. The Ringer's Mirren Fader writes that Davante Adams has reservations about Las Vegas's vision for the offense. A giant quote here from Adams. The pullout to me here, guys, is from Adams, we don't see eye to eye on what we think is best for us right now, which just screams maybe some doubt about Josh McDaniels' offensive system, I would think.
Well, but I think it's three things. This one's a really hard kind of, because I don't totally understand what they think. It's like, I think it's the best bet for us right now to put us in a position to be urgent, which is great. But then he's just like, maybe we don't see eye to eye on what we think is best for us right now, maybe to accomplish that. And then down there, if you look at the bottom of the quote, if we play a certain brand of ball, if I can get, and he references Garoppolo there to conform, I can get Garoppolo to conform to whatever, but if we use him a certain type of way, then it's going to make it tough for us to maximize who we should be this year. Basically saying, I feel like I'm interpreting that to say, like, hey, if Garoppolo's just going to be dumping it off and being a game manager, like, that's not what I signed up for, But if we can start throwing it deep, if we can be aggressive down the field, then maybe that'll be okay. But you do sort of feel like you feel for Davante Adams here. I mean, again, the whole reason he left a really good situation in Green Bay playing with Aaron Rodgers was to go reunite with Derek Carr, one of his best friends in the world, his college quarterback. And now Derek Carr is a member of the New Orleans Saints. They get rid of Darren Waller as well in the offseason. They bring in Jacoby Myers, but they just signed Josh Jacobs. They just do a one-year deal with Josh Jacobs and the franchise tag. We'll see if they get something long-term established, but it does feel weird, right? That was a team that was really run heavy last year.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, is that it's not like he signed, like, Derek Carr's not a great deep ball thrower. That's never been his game, his archetype. Like, he's got a quarterback who is...
He's better than you think he is.
I will
just say this.
The thing is that he was so unwilling to do it for so long. And
that may be a McDaniels thing. We don't know. But I would push back on Derek Carr not being a good deep ball thrower.
Well, I just don't think that Garoppolo I think he's a reasonable facsimile of Derek Carr. I don't think they're drastically different. And the fact that, you've still got Renfro, you've got Jacoby Myers in there, you've got some talent pass catching at tight end, you've got maybe the best running back in football. Like, it's not like he's just wilting away on what's going to be a dreadful offense. Like, there should still be enough there. I'd be a lot more concerned about the defense in Vegas.
It just feels like they're not going to be, again, right, but Jacoby Myers is a fine player. We like Jacoby Myers. We like Hunter Renfro, also a fine player. Both those guys are possession guys, right? I mean, again, and you think about what Garoppolo has done. The brilliance of Garoppolo, and I'm using that phrase very casually here, but the brilliance of Garoppolo was in that Kyle Shanahan offense. He's really accurate, Garoppolo is, and so Shanahan would scheme up all these mismatches where you're putting Deebo Samuel in motion, where you're getting George Kittle up against a linebacker or whatever. He would create all these mismatches to basically let Garoppolo throw a short pass that was accurate, and whether it was Deebo or Brandon Ayuk or George Kittle or later in the season Christian McCaffrey last year, get these guys that are incredibly good after the catch to get tons and tons of yak. And so I sort of get it if I'm Davante Adams.
I think the worst sign for Davante Adams is how good Brock Purdy looked in the Kyle Shanahan offense, but that just really lends credence to the idea that Garoppolo is a product of scheme, and we haven't seen him really flourish outside of that. So, yeah, I mean, they play in the toughest division in football. They're the fourth team in that division. It's probably going to be a tough year for Vegas.
All of that said, just to wrap this up and we can move on, the fact is that for our purposes, for fantasy football, it sort of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, Davante Adams is going to get his. He is still one of the best wide receivers in football. He still had back-to-back years with over 1,500 receiving yards. He's had at least 1,300 in 4 of the last 5. He's one of only 2 wide receivers in the NFL to have at least 100 receptions and double-digit touchdowns each of the last 2 years. He's my wide receiver 6. I'm not moving off that ranking because of he's frustrated. I get it, because he went there thinking one thing, and now the team has gone a slightly different way. We expect Josh McDaniels to once again be run heavy, and there's going to have to be a learning curve with Garoppolo that wasn't there with Rodgers or with Carr, his old college roommate. But whatever. He's still Davante Adams. He's still going to get a ton of looks. He'll be fine.
Sticking with the theme of wide receivers, Saints coach Dennis Allen said he expects Michael Thomas to be good to go for training camp. Now, this one maybe take with a grain of salt. We know Michael Thomas has not gotten to play a lot over the last couple of years. He's been dealing with a lot of injuries. Jay, you see the stats right on the screen right there. I mean, it's just been a long time since Michael Thomas has been a consistent performer because of health.
I mean, yeah, it's been basically 3 lost seasons. It should be said that in 2019 he did literally win Offensive Player of the Year and was the best wide receiver in football. But, I mean, that guy, the thing is that when he did play this season, he looked pretty good. I thought he looked better than expected. He wasn't washed or anything like that. And the idea of how Thomas can fit into this offense with an upgraded quarterback in Carr, with Chris Olave, who I think is going to be a bona fide superstar. I mean, if he's healthy and he's right, then he's going to be a weapon, but there's just nothing to suggest at this point that he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for a little bit. We have a group chat for the show. We have a group chat for the show among Jay is on and all of our producers. Are you on this group chat?
I am, just like the fantasy league. I've snuck into this.
Have
one.
you? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So apparently Connor's on the.
I watch from afar and react once in a while.
Connor's on the group chat as well.
Group
apparently.
chat
So whatever.
boy,
There's a bunch of us on this group chat, and I was running. Kids were late to school. Blah blah blah. And I tweeted something. I texted something into the group chat. Hey, running late, because of course I am. I am typically. I have a lot of skills. Time management is not one of them.
It's part of your brand.
Part of my brand. It's on
Yes.
brand for me.
It'd be creepy if you were on the call at 9:59.
Yeah, it'd be weird.
I would be unsettled.
It'd be what's going on?
Yeah.
Who kidnapped Matthew? So, but anyway, the point is so I text that, hey, I'm running late, and Pete, one of our producers, texts back evergreen text, which is 100% accurate and fair, and that's what I feel like about Michael Thomas here.
Yes.
Oh, Michael Thomas is feeling really good in training camp.
Yeah.
Evergreen tweet, evergreen statement. that then winds up not being true at all.
Matthew's on the call at 10:07.
Yeah, of course. I don't know why we don't start the call at 10:07. Honestly, Stephen, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Make life easier. But
actually,
tell me.
Here's what
you should do.
10:14.
No. Right, exactly.
Yes.
You guys internally should say, hey guys, the real start time of the call is 10:07. Tell me it's 10, and then we can go from there. But with Michael Thomas, it's like, okay. I mean, again, it has been 3 years. Now it's a new quarterback. Again, no Sean Payton there, who was his coordinator and his play caller when he was a fantasy superstar. If there's a positive to hang your hat on last year, when he was healthy, and it was a very small sample size, just 3 games, but he averaged 17 fantasy points per game in those 3 games. He had over 7 targets a game, almost a 20% target share. They were looking for him early and often. I don't think there's a fantasy draft in the world where Chris Olave doesn't go, 5, 6, 8 rounds ahead of Michael Thomas. I'm at wide receiver 35. Thomas this year, just fine. He's a wide receiver 4. He's a flyer. If he can stay healthy, is there potentially some value there? Sure, maybe. But for me, I feel like for my wide receiver 4, I'd rather take a chance on like this year's Chris Olave. I'd rather take a chance on, Jordan Addison or something like that, somebody that could pop, versus Michael Thomas, who, I get it, last year was good, but that was before Olave, sort of exploded, and, I don't know. They also signed James Washington.
I mean, the one thing is that he's 30. He's the same age as Davante Adams, the guy we were just talking about. So in theory, if he's able to get his body right, he should have a lot of good football left. And he did look really good when he was out there, but I think you just have to see it. You have to see Michael Thomas log on to the call at 10 a.m.
He is right, exactly. He is a close your nose, hope for the best. Close your eyes, hold your nose, hope for the best. Kind of draft pick. He is no one that I would want to target going into drafts.
On a more optimistic note, Falcons running back Bijan Robinson said head coach Arthur Smith uses me everywhere from receiver to running back when asked about where he's lined up in minicamp. Very huge expectations for Bijan even as a rookie, and this is the type of thing that'll sell even more promise.
And I'm annoyed about this, and I'm going to tell you why I'm annoyed about this. Because, again, it's all about me. And the fact of the matter is that when he was drafted, one of the things I said, and we talked about this on draft night, we've talked about it since, so it's like I could see them using him like Cordero Patterson. Think about how creative they were with Cordero Patterson in this offense. Catching passes, going long, using him in the slot, using him in the backfield, just lining up all over the place. And I was just like, that's the potential here with Bijan Robinson. It's not that he's a good running back who's going to get 20 touches. It's that, there's going to be lots of creative ways to use him. So that's what I said. But now Arthur Smith comes out Bijan himself comes out and tells everyone this. And it's just like, well, now I get no credit for that. It's very upsetting. It's very upsetting to me. And I know what you're saying, like, wow, Barry, did you just make this positive spin note about Bijan Robinson somehow about you? And the answer, Jay Croucher, is yes, I did, because that's my superpower. That's what I can do better than anyone else in the world. Take whatever subject it is and somehow make it about me.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson as a receiver is about Matthew Berry. I think.
Did I not just accomplish that? Thank you, America. God bless.
There's a chance that we look back in week 10 and be like, why didn't Bijan just go first in drafts? Like, why didn't we see this coming? This is the best team in the NFL that he could have gone to for his fantasy value for this season with their commitment to running the ball. I think they were the only team that had more run plays than pass plays last season, and they weren't even a winning team, and they were able to do that. And now they've got the best running back prospects since Adrian Peterson. If you want to, you can throw Saquon Barkley in there as well. They've got the top 3 run blocking offensive line, and they should have, I think, a better quarterback situation. It's not necessarily that Desmond Ridder is going to be better than Marcus Mariota, but I think that Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke, whoever is better out of those two, will probably be better than Marcus Mariota. And then you've got Matthews, Man, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London kind of spacing the floor for Bijan. I think he's going to be an absolute force.
I am not ranking him as my number 1 running back.
No.
But finishing as the number 1 running back in fantasy is certainly within the realm of possibilities for Bijan Robinson this year. It is within the range of outcomes, there's no question.
He is the corollary to what Justin Fields is at the quarterback position, where he might have a higher upside than just about anyone, just because we haven't seen it. There's some variance. But, you're going to take Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes over Fields. You're going to take Christian McCaffrey over Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, 100%.
Jay, you've talked.
He's right there.
Yeah,
I think I have Bijan Robinson at running back 5 overall. I might be too low.
It's in play.
And you've talked about how he's being undervalued. Forget Offensive Rookie of the Year. Offensive Player of the Year is on the table, and he's out of range right now in terms of the odds.
Yeah, I mean, he's like 60 to 1, 50 to 1, that type of range for Offensive Player of the Year. And that award, that's a fantasy football award. That is just, if you are the best at your position in terms of standard scoring, fantasy production, then you typically win that award so long as you're on a winning team and you beat out the other best wide receiver or the best running back. And Bijan, I think he has a huge chance.
Right. I mean, 2 years ago, I think Cooper Kupp won that award, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
Cooper
I mean,
Kupp.
when he had the monster year, and so.
That was Michael Thomas in 2019 when he was the best wide receiver in fantasy.
Yeah. And by the way, think about, just play that out for a second here, right? That's not a division that's unwinnable for the Falcons.
No.
I mean, they were right there last year. I mean, Carolina, Tampa Bay, New Orleans are all sort of rebuilding. Like, I would assume the Saints are probably the favorite right now, but you don't feel like, oh, yeah, there's no way we can beat Derek Carr. Like,
Yeah.
I mean.
They are the favorite, but they're also like, I don't know, they're like the 18th best team in football, the Saints.
Right.
So they're very, very beatable. And the Falcons are the second favorite in that division, so they could just go 10-7 and Bijan could be the best running back in the sport.
Staying with running back usage, your Commanders, Barry, head coach Ron Rivera said he would like to get Antonio Gibson more touches in 2023. The old we would like to do. Rivera actually said he's intrigued by the way Gibson fits into what Eric Bieniemy wants to do with the offense.
And that's the key of it. I mean, the fact of the matter is Ron Rivera can say, I'd like to get him more touches. Ron Rivera is not going to touch the offense. He never has. He never will. Eric Bieniemy, the assistant head coach, and coming in to call the plays, to run the offense. I interviewed Ron Rivera at the NFL Combine, and you can watch that video, on the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. What I will tell you is that when I asked Coach Rivera, and I said, hey, what was it about Eric Bieniemy that made you think this is the guy to run your offense? And he said, I loved how dynamic he made all the plays in Kansas City and how he was able to spread the ball around, especially getting the running backs involved in the passing game. And so as you sit there and you look at the backfield from last year, J.D. McKissick isn't there, Jonathan Williams is whatever, Curtis Samuel, they sprinkle it in. I think you're going to see Brian Robinson in the Isaiah Pacheco role and Antonio Gibson in the Jerick McKinnon role, just to use kind of a very simple, basic comparison, a little bit of a lazy comparison, but honestly, it's going to be a little bit of that. Like Gibson is, and Connor, we weren't working together at the time that he came out, but my assumption would be is when he came out of college, you were talking about his pass catching because this is a guy that was more of a wide receiver at Memphis.
Does.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Kenneth Gainwell,
Right.
same mold. I mean, this is what Memphis does. If you're a run, and yes, he actually legitimately played wide receiver as well. It's the fact that you can be motioned out wide, or you can sit in the backfield, or just be thrown to as a running back. So the McKinnon, I don't think that's a lazy comparison. I think that's actually spot on, especially when you talk about a coach going to a new place and looking at players that are on the roster no matter what that he's had success with. The usage should be very similar.
46 receptions last year, a 12% target share in a year in which J.D. McKissick played like half the season off the top of my head. Again, so McKissick's not back. And, it literally is going to be thunder and lightning. It's going to be Robinson and Gibson. And so given his skill set and his versatility, Antonio Gibson, because he is somebody that can still run between the tackles. He is somebody that can play in the slot. He can go out wide. They can use him in a variety of different ways. I do think Gibson becomes kind of an interesting later round flyer in PPR.
Yep. I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought Brian Robinson, even though his yards per carry wasn't particularly efficient, I thought he looked fantastic last season, and he had a top 10 PFF grade for running backs. Do you think that he could add a receiving element to his game? Looks like Gibson's going to get the usage there, but could Robinson be more of a pass catcher?
He can catch the ball, and his pass protection keeps him on the field on those downs.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're looking at, is he going to be the guy in the slot that catches the bubble screens or gets the premium receiving back usage? No, but in terms of being a check down outlet or a slip screen guy, that is absolutely in the cards for Brian Robinson.
And we just don't know what we're going to get out of Sam Howell, but inexperienced quarterback, you would think he might be more prone to dumping off than perhaps a more veteran quarterback that's, more used to just, getting rid of the ball quickly, or, somebody who's more athletic than Sam Howell that could just scramble out of danger, right? Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, they can just do that, right? Sam Howell's not going to be able to run away from a defender the way like those quarterbacks could.
Yep.
Broncos head coach Sean Payton reiterated the team believes Samaje Perine can play all 3 downs. We got to see Perine's usage sharing a backfield with Joe Mixon last year, guys. And Peyton also said this about Javonte Williams. Hopefully might not start on the pup. That's not really the most optimistic quote.
And that's the thing. And I saw a lot of people, it's interesting. It's so important to read every single word, right? And I saw a lot of people sort of talk about that quote from Peyton about hallelujah, Javonte Williams, he's a great value, blah, blah, blah. And look, and I'm like, read that again. Hopefully
might not.
hopefully might not. There's a lot of caveats. I mean, they signed Samaje Perine to a real contract. Not just to be and the Bengals wanted to keep Perine, and he had other offers. And one of the things that came out once that signing happened, and I saw this on Pro Football Talk as well, is that that Peyton talked about, I sold Perine on, and Perine kind of corroborated this, that hey, think about what I did in New Orleans. I used multiple running backs. I'm very creative at how I use them. And you think about sort of the heyday of Mark Ingram, the Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, not his second stint with the team, but sort of the heyday there when that offense was really humming. And Mark Ingram had legit fantasy value to the chagrin of people that had Kamara on their roster. And so Perine, who had 4 different games last year where he had double-digit touches, he averaged 21.3 fantasy points per game. The 2 games that Joe Mixon missed, 248 total yards. And you think about the 5 of the 6 season. Here's just a number to tell you what we just already know sort of anecdotally. Sean Payton gave 150 or more touches to multiple running backs in 5 of his last 6 seasons with the Saints. He had at least 2 running backs get at least 150 touches 5 of the last 6 seasons with New Orleans. So he, especially given that we don't know when Javonte Williams is going to play, and if he does, they might ease him back in. Samaje Perine is somebody that, again, Sean Payton, new regime, went out and said, that's a guy I want. Let me pay him some money. I think Perine's a good value this year.
I think that Javonte Williams obviously has more upside and is more explosive, but I would make Perine a favorite head-to-head to outscore him in fantasy this season just because he might be getting a 6-week head start. And then the other thing is that when you're not giving the ball to Perine with the Super Bowl on the line, he's really good. He's really,
right.
really solid outside of, giving the ball to him with the Super Bowl on the line,
Yeah.
which they probably shouldn't have done. But I think that Perine's got the talent, and he's going to be a very unexciting pick in fantasy drafts, but a very good pick, I would think, for the most part.
Yeah, massive upside depending on how much time Williams misses. And if Williams is healthy, I still think there's a role there for Perine to have positive fantasy value. I don't know where you'd get a line on that, but I like the bet of Perine to have more fantasy points total for the year than Javonte Williams.
Yep.
Moving over to the Bucs, their quarterback coach Thad Lewis said Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield will get even reps during summer practice. A little battle here in Bucs camp, Jay.
Well, it's been a steep fall-off, one, for Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans who've gone from the greatest quarterback of all time to a quarterback battle between Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. And then, 2, it's quite a steep drop-off for Baker Mayfield as well. I mean, do you think he's just a write-off, Connor? Versus what he put up in college where he's a consensus #1 pick. Is there just nothing left of this guy?
It seems like the shoulder injury he suffered in Cleveland that he played through definitely physically limited him. And it feels like, honestly, as well, the mental side of the game has not caught up to the pro level. I mean, he drifts backwards a lot. He runs into pressure. The arm strength is not the same as it was as a prospect in that early Cleveland days. And I think simply Baker Mayfield hasn't been a good decision maker either. It's unfortunate. And this is a good offense, right? There's still receiving talent. The offensive line will be better. But Baker Mayfield should be dominating Kyle Trask in a camp, and the Bucs don't seem to expect that.
Here's the thing with Baker. If you want to make the case for Baker, he was really good in his first and third years in the season. I think year 2 was the Freddie Kitchens year. He was injured year 4. He did the shoulder in year 4. And then last year, he gets signed by Carolina, doesn't have much time to prepare, and then he's on the Rams
late
all of a sudden.
Late in the season. He gets late into camp, he gets signed in Carolina.
So there is, it's a bit of a stretch, and it's a bit of a concern. He was on Carolina for a while, and he didn't get better, which is the red flag. And he wasn't great in LA either, though. He's a little bit better. So I wouldn't completely put a line through Baker Mayfield, but it's certainly trending in the wrong direction.
You have to squid to get there, but you can get there.
Yeah.
And right again, if there was if you were a quarterback in the NFL and you're look, all you have to do to get the starting job is to beat out Kyle Trask, you'd like that opportunity. You know what I mean? Kyle Trask was a guy that people were somewhat surprised when he was drafted. He felt like he was going to be, a career backup was the best case scenario.
Or day 3 pick that got taken in the second round.
Right. I mean, just so, and to your point, there is offensive talent on the Buccaneers, but sort of fantasy-wise, I don't know that this matters.
No.
It does. Neither one of these guys, whoever's the starting quarterback will be drafted in deep 2 quarterback leagues, super flex leagues. That's it. Maybe if one of them has some success and they have a good matchup, you could see you streaming one of them as a bye week guy. But just whether it's Baker or Kyle Trask, neither of those guys run. and it's hard to see them putting up in the Tampa Bay offense, even though they have Evans and Godwin, it's hard to see them putting up massive numbers.
Yeah, I think if you draft Mike Evans in particular, you're hoping for a trade in the first 6 weeks of the season or before the season starts, because it's just very hard to see Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both ending the season on a team that's starting Kyle Trask potentially. Like, those guys have a lot to offer contenders.
It's a weird sort of thing there in Tampa Bay, because you're sort of like, well, what are you guys doing? Are you guys tearing it all down? Or are you, quote, going for it? Because they've got
Timeline's odd.
It does feel a little bit weird, and it's similar to kind of what's going on with the Raiders, right? You sort of feel like, hang on, you got rid of Carr and you got rid of Darren Waller, but then you also signed Garoppolo to a big deal, and anyway, it's just a little.
The issue there
seems
too
weird.
that complicates the timeline is that the division is so bad. Like, they could win the division.
Yes, they
like,
could.
this team is a mess, but they're only plus 500 to win the division. And Todd Bowles probably wants to save his job. And if they go 9-8, 10-7, and win the division,
Coach trying to save his job, Sam McDaniels with the Raiders.
Yep.
Very weirdly similar situations that'll be hard to dissect.
Yeah.
Our final Roto World headline: the Kokomo Tribune's George Bremer said Colts coach. I had to make sure this was
good
real.
job, buddy.
Yeah,
I thought somebody was pranking me in the rundown. George Bremer said Colts coaches have been impressed by quarterback Anthony Richardson's pocket awareness. That's what you like to see.
Yeah. Now, do you think it means when he says that? Do you think he's like, when he's been doing plays, he's he feels really good in the pocket, and he's got good pocket awareness, or do you think it's like just sort of like, ooh, that's the pocket, like he's aware of where it is, like he can point it out on film?
I think it's absolutely what they've seen in practices and shorts.
Got it. Okay, that makes
Which,
sense. It was just a poorly phrased sentence. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Everyone's sort of like, so the reaction on fantasy Twitter, I don't know if you guys saw this. The reaction on fantasy Twitter was, yeah, coach speak, whatever, Anthony Richardson, blah, blah, blah. But then our friend and colleague Denny Carter tweeted out, he says, everyone's going to laugh about this until he drops 38 on the Jaguars in week 1. And I quote tweeted and I said this, because I have to tell you, like, 38's an exaggeration, honestly, but Anthony Richardson, I think, is arguably a top 12 fantasy quarterback from day one. Again, we know there's accuracy issues. We know there's concern about the arm until he gets more reps and more up to speed. But he is such an amazing athlete. And because of the rushing, in terms of fantasy, think about Lamar Jackson's rookie year. They literally would not let Lamar Jackson throw the ball his rookie year, right? And he came in over the final 9 games. He had 7 starts. And in those 7 starts, he averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game. He was the 9th best quarterback in fantasy over that stretch and almost never threw the ball. Jalen Hurts had only 4 games. And by the way, Jalen Hurts' rookie year, Doug Peterson's fighting with Howie Roseman. It's tons of injuries as well. They had like AAF superstars where like their best, they had no skilled players around Jalen Hurts. And yet, in 4 starts, he averaged 23 fantasy points per game. Once again, the 9th best quarterback in fantasy in his rookie year of 2020. I'm telling you guys, Anthony Richardson, from moment 1, the minute he's announced the starter as the Colts, he's a top 12 fantasy quarterback.
Yep.
Even if he never throws a pass.
Yep. I think it's going to be an incredible sign for Richardson and his fantasy value if they have him as the week 1 starter, which I think is probably an underdog. You'd probably think they start off with Gardner Minshew, but the thing is to remember is that coaches generally know better than we do. Outside of Nuggets-Lakers last night, where Jamal Murray should not have been switching on to LeBron. But outside of that, usually coaches know better. Yes. And if they believe that Anthony Richardson is ready to start week 1, then go ahead, bet him to an offensive rookie of the year, because he should be second favorite after Bijan if that's the case, and go ahead and draft him pretty high.
And by the way, there's other aspects at play here. I again, you never like to always quote draft day, but
when you can.
Doing it a lot lately.
When you can, we are. But no, I mean, like the one, there's much that's wrong with draft day. But one thing that's very real is an owner coming to a coach and a general manager saying, "I need butts in the seats. I want some excitement. I want the back pages, and I want the front page of the sports section of the newspaper. Put that guy in. Do that. Do that." It's one of the things that, candidly, with the Commanders was a huge issue with the Commanders, because the coaching staff all wanted Kirk Cousins, but Snyder wanted RG3. Like in year 2 or 3, when they realized RG3 just wasn't right with a leg, and in practice everyone was like, Cousins is outplaying him every single week. So the point is like there's a scenario where they may say coach-wise, we think Minshew is probably a little bit more NFL ready than Anthony Richardson, where Jim Irsay, who is certainly not shy about voicing his opinion, says I don't care. We use the 4th overall pick on this kid. He's starting day one. And there's also a scenario where they say, look, is he ready? No, he's not. But you know what? The best way to learn? Trial by fire. Just get out there.
Yes, you have to play.
Right.
That was the thing with Richardson at Florida. There was times where they tried to kind of keep training wheels on him there, and they finally just let him play this last year. And you look at the second half of the season, the last 7 games, touchdown-interception ratio was significantly better. Let the guy play. And I think Steichen and the Colts are going to come to that conclusion after a couple weeks of August.
Yep. And I think as well, that what happened, the path that Rodgers and Mahomes took, like that happened to work out. It also might have worked out if they just played from the start.
Right.
Well, we don't know that. Like everyone's like, oh, it definitely worked because they did this. Maybe Mahomes would have just been good his first year.
And by the way, let's be clear here. In the Rodgers and Mahomes scenarios, like with Mahomes, they had Alex Smith, a former number 1 overall pick, a very good NFL quarterback who, yes, had led them to the playoffs the year before, right? And with Rodgers, it's Brett freaking Favre.
Yep.
So, I mean, like, both those guys, like, Alex Smith isn't a Hall of Famer, but Alex Smith was an above-average NFL quarterback and certainly very solid. Favre is a Hall of Famer. And so, all due respect to Gardner Minshew, he ain't either of those guys.
Yeah.
So, right. I mean, I do think, they just got to let him play. And he'll take some lumps, but I'm telling you, as soon as he is named the starter, and hopefully it's by week 1, top 12 fantasy quarterback.
Yep.
And he will develop.
Especially in a division that, I mean, what are you afraid of? The Texans are probably going to start Stroud. There's just not a lot in that division that you're looking at and going, we're so afraid to play our guy.
Right. I mean, Tennessee's going to have Tannehill, but they
Last
may.
year, Tannehill.
But they may turn to Will Levis at some point if you believe it. So, and then you get the Jaguars, who were a great story last year, and we like them this year, but they're certainly not world beaters at this point.
No, they're probably a 10-7 team.
Yeah.
Before we get to Matthew's positional rankings, going on this week, right around the corner from us on the unbuttoned set, Chris Sims is counting down his top 40 quarterbacks. Some of the young guns have made the list. So be sure to see where all the biggest names fall over the next few weeks on Chris Sims Unbuttoned.
39.
So you see right here, Sam Howell.
Sam Howell at 39.
Sam Howell at 39 behind 3 guys that have never taken a snap in the NFL.
That's outrageous.
Wait, is it? Is it
It's
though?
outrageous. Yes. Come on, at 39. Sims. Where were you? Like, you did Sims' show today, didn't you?
I did the next tier,
You
which
did
I
the
don't want to
next
give
tier?
away. Yep.
All right, that's fine. You don't have to give it away. But did you at least fight for Sam Howell at all? Could you help me out?
We did. We had a really nice conversation that Howell's ceiling gives him the chance to be one of the biggest leapers for next year's rankings.
Where was Jake from? Where's Jacoby Brissett?
25.
Jacoby Brissett.
As
like
a Commanders
Jacoby
fan,
Brissett.
what I can tell you though is it is worth noting that Chris Sims, number 1, also had Diami Brown as his number 3 wide receiver coming out of the draft. Did not work out.
Still time.
Yeah, it was still time. There's still time.
That's what we always say when we miss the
Right,
draft.
it's fair. It's still
They're
time.
in the
It's
league. There is still time.
always
He was anti-Jalen Hurts at the beginning of the year.
It's kind of the beginning of your feud.
In fairness to Sims, is my buddy. In fairness to Sims, he was out on Hurts as an elite quarterback. He wasn't out on Hurts as a quarterback. He was just out on Hurts as an elite, as an elite quarterback.
What was his big one? He had Burrow over Rodgers and Brady, though, right?
By the way, he was right on that.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
got to give him
Yep.
total credit. He was he was ahead. He had Burrow ahead of Rodgers and Brady going into last year, which I thought was sacrilege. And by the way, I was dead wrong on that. He was absolutely right.
Make or miss league.
So we'll
Make or
just
miss
see.
league, Connor.
I just want Sam Howell to be higher than 39. That's all. Is that so
gonna get the
wrong?
chance.
Maybe we'll get there.
He's going to get the chance.
There you go.
Speaking of ranking quarterbacks here, Barry, let's get into your positional rankings. Of course, from a fantasy perspective, quarterbacks 1 through 10 right here. No surprise. We've talked about this before. Josh Allen slightly edges out Jalen Hurts. And then the rest of this list after that, Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, no surprises there. Justin Fields making the top 10 after the rushing performance he put on last year. And obviously you're expecting a pretty big leap from Deshaun Watson after a rusty, shortened season last year.
I certainly am. So I just want to point out a couple of guys here. And I may swap, Fields and Herbert. That one I really struggled with. Same as well. Lamar, Herbert, and Fields, candidly, right? That 5, 6, 7 are all just sort of right there. Here's the argument for Lamar, and I know people are concerned about the injury history, which is fair, but at least 20 fantasy points per game in 3 of the last 4 seasons, 4 straight years with 750 rushing yards, and I'm excited about Todd Monken. I'm just excited about the creativity that I think he'll bring to this offense. Certainly OBJ needs to get healthy, Rashad Bateman needs to get healthy, but they've added some weapons for L. Jax this year. He's got the big contract. Herbert, Yeah, I know a lot of people might be like, Herbert, really? Like, I get it. But last year, they finally added a deep threat for him as well. Last season, in what a lot of people thought was a down year for Herbert, he still was top 3 in both pass attempts and passing yards per game. And with Kellen Moore coming in to call the plays there, remember what Kellen Moore did in Dallas, even with conservative Mike McCarthy over him. Top 6 in points 3 of the last 4 seasons under Kellen Moore. I think that offense takes another step. And then you saw Trevor Lawrence down there at 8. 9 different games last year with at least 18 fantasy points. That was top 5 among all quarterbacks, top 10 in pass attempts per game. Another year in Peterson's system. Remember, they got Calvin Ridley back as well. So in addition to, they brought back Evan Ingram, they've got Christian Kirk, they've got Zay Jones, they've Travis Etienne, another year removed from his injury. So they've got all the weapons that were there last year, and then they add Calvin Ridley, again, second year in the system, and felt like, forget fantasy for a second, from a pure football standpoint, it felt like second half of the year, the light clicked on for Trevor Lawrence, and he was just like, okay, now I get what it means to be in the NFL and be a guy that's just like, get on my back, we're going down on this drive, we're going to win the game.
Yep.
Being that guy.
He went from mediocre or below average to like fringe MVP candidate level production in the second half of the season. Want to read you a stat line,
okay.
Matthew, Connor?
Please.
4,823 passing yards, 70% completion rate, 112 QB rating, 33-7 touchdown interception ratio, and then another 444 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns, and the 5th best quarterback in fantasy. That's what Deshaun Watson did in his last full season, and there is a chance that he comes out and is just a top 3, top 5 quarterback in football. I think that when talking about quarterbacks with upside, I think the guys who have the biggest deltas, the biggest kind of range between best and worst outcomes, it's Deshaun Watson and Justin Fields. Those are the 2 guys, because Fields could just be the best guy, like we were talking about. He could also just not break off 70-yard touchdown runs for fun. And then Deshaun Watson, he was pretty bad last season, but he also could be, he's never going to win an MVP in this league, I don't think, but he could put up that kind of production.
The thing on Watson is, to your point about range of outcomes, absolutely. He's a guy that was a fantasy superstar in Houston. There's no question about it, and there's weapons there in Cleveland, right? And so we both like Cedric Tillman. I don't like him as much as you do. I like him, and I don't like him as much as you do. I know you're all in on Cedric Tillman.
Absolutely.
Right? And they have Amari Cooper. And David Njoku kind of had a breakout year last year as well. The concerns are, when he was putting up massive fantasy numbers in Houston, bad defense, crazy shootouts, controlled environment, right? They played half their games in a dome inside. Man, those November games in Cleveland when the wind's whipping around, they're brutal. And so that's the concern. It's a tougher division as well. Whether it's the Bengals, the Steelers, or the Ravens, every single one of those, forget record, they're all going to be knockdown, drag-out defensive fights. So those are the concerns on Deshaun Watson. But the skill set is there, and we expect the offensive scheme there to be there, where he could put up easy top 5 fantasy numbers.
I thought Stefanski won Coach of the Year in the past 3 years. Also, they've got a top 3 offensive line in football. They have weapons, and also they have a running game that Deshaun Watson, I don't think, ever had really in Houston. So, it is all there.
And he's pretty good on play action, too.
Yes. Yeah, he could have a monster season.
You wisely had Trevor Lawrence in the top 10, sitting there at 8. Trevor Lawrence is watching the quarterback rankings. Kyle Brandt, in his quarterback rankings, had Lawrence all the way down there in tier 6. And Trevor Lawrence's response to that was, the game ain't played on paper.
Fair.
Well, fantasy football literally is.
Fantasy football, though, Trevor Lawrence is.
Yeah, it is.
And that's why Barry
played
values
on paper.
you.
Yeah,
that's
played
the
on
top 8
paper.
quarterback.
Played on your phone. Played on the computer. Yeah. Who's Kyle Brandt? I'm Team Lawrence here. I'm Team T-Law.
Yeah, we're gonna get rid of T-Law as a nickname, but outside of that,
it's
trending up.
Let's take a look at the running back rankings. And we had an earlier conversation, Barry, how you said I might be too low on Bijan Robinson. He's sitting there at number 5, only behind Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, and Jonathan Taylor. Very familiar names in the first round of fantasy, especially in redraft leagues.
And honestly, there is a scenario where he goes number 2 after McCaffrey among running backs, right? We'll see what happens with Eckler's situation. If he's not back with the Chargers, and that's a situation that still hasn't sort of been resolved. So I could see a scenario where if he's not with the Chargers, you move him off. Taylor, if you don't get great reports, or if I'm in a draft and someone takes Bijan Robinson as the number 2 running back, I'm not looking at him weird going, what are you doing? Like that's certainly in the
I would do it,
scenario. Like
personally.
right, you would.
I would do it personally.
I think I would too.
Yeah. I have
mean,
a
it's
little
close.
note at the end of today's show of why when we talk
Okay.
schedules, so I'll save it. But yes, I would take Bijan Robinson number 2 overall.
Like I said, I think I might be too low on him for sure. I could see a scenario where he jumps over Taylor and Saquon as well.
Yep.
So we'll see. And by the way, Eckler if Eckler moves on.
Jay,
Go ahead.
Jay, what do you think of those rankings? Is there a guy in the outside the top 5 that you could see having a top 5 finish?
Yeah, Tony Pollard is
Okay.
the really interesting one to me, particularly if, there's no Ezekiel Elliott and he doesn't kind of resurface, which I think fantasy managers hopes that he resurfaces somewhere else so he doesn't disrupt Tony Pollard. But Pollard had a stretch, I want to say from like week 8 to 16, that type of range, where he was just about the best running back around. He is, just whenever he gets usage, he just produces like an absolute monster. He's another guy who's 60-1 for Offensive Player of the Year. He could absolutely win that award. So he's the interesting one to me. I think Josh Jacobs as well. He's just a difficult guy to project. He was the best pure running back in the league last year, won the rushing title. It's just the weirdness of like the contract situation, and that team just doesn't seem to be trending in the right direction. But he is still an absolute beast when he's out there.
No question about it, but 393 total touches last year, and so almost near that magic 400 number, and we have seen traditionally some drop off when players get that kind of usage. Now, he's incredibly tough. He's still very, very young, but that's something that one of the reasons why I'm at 6, and I think there's an argument you could have him even higher. And coming in at number 10, how about Rhamondre Stevenson? Again, no Damian Harris there. It's really going to be the Rhamondre show for the Patriots. One of the things that's exciting for me is that this is a guy that had a 17% target share last year, which is 3rd highest among running backs. You don't really think of Rhamondre Stevenson when you think about the McCaffreys, the Ecklers, the true pass-catching running backs, but he was right there in terms of target share from weeks 3 through 13. There was a 10-game stretch there where he was the 3rd best running back in fantasy, averaging over 18 points per game. Again, no Damian Harris. There's no one on the Patriots roster that you think
That's the key.
well, that's who takes up some of the slack for him. Last year it was with Damian Harris.
Yeah, and there's also no concern like with, say, Dallas. Maybe they just throw the ball a lot more because they got a good offensive line and Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. Like, the Patriots aren't going to have Mac Jones throwing the ball 45 times. Like, they want to run.
They do, and I think they'll have a more cohesive offensive unit under Bill O'Brien than they did last year, which was kind of a mess. So you think about Bill O'Brien and you think about some of the years he had in Houston. Think about like Arian Foster, and so I think Rhamondre is a top 10 player this year.
Let's move over to your wide receiver rankings. Your top 10 here, headlined by Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp in their own tier there at the top. Obviously, big expectations for a Kupp bounce back here, Barry, and then a lot of familiar characters. Besides Garrett Wilson breaking into the top 10 after winning Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Insanely talented, and now gets Aaron Rodgers, who's
Right.
No dummy. Rodgers is going to look for Wilson early and often. You see all sort of the typical names there that you expect. I don't think there's any shock. But Kupp I want to talk about at number 2. I thought Jay, believe it or not, brought up a great point the other time we talked about
Nicely
Cooper
done,
Kupp.
Jay.
Yeah, exactly. Every once in a while you run into it. But the point is that, no, what Jay said, which I thought was so smart and spot on, was that Cooper Kupp 2 years ago, the year the Rams won the Super Bowl, proved that when they're winning, he can be the best wide receiver in fantasy football. He can just be a dominant force. But last year, when everything that could go wrong did go wrong, he was still a dominant force. We forget about it because Jefferson's season was so magical and because he got hurt. But last year, on a points per game basis, no one was better than Cooper Kupp. He averaged more fantasy points per game than Justin Jefferson, than Tyreek Hill, than Jamar Chase, than anyone. 22.4 fantasy points per game in his 8 full games. That's what he averaged. Had over 25 fantasy points in 5 of those 8 full games. So even in a season in which everything that could have gone wrong for the Rams did go wrong, he was still an elite fantasy option. The floor is so high with Kupp, as is the upside. I not only have him as my number 2 wide receiver, but I have him as a top 4 overall pick.
Yep, no, absolutely with Kupp. We kind of maybe forget about it a little bit, but he did have maybe the greatest wide receiver season in history 2 years ago, and he's still young enough where it should be the same type of operation. The one thing with him that I would worry about, and maybe this is irrational, but you look at the other guys around him, guys like Jefferson, like Chase, other guys as well, like Tyreek Hill. You expect that they're going to be on winning teams and playing meaningful games late in the season. I would worry a little bit that if Cooper Kupp has a niggling ankle injury, if that team is out of the mix, maybe he's not playing the last 3 weeks of the season, whereas the other guys, you know that they're probably going to be out there. So that would just be the one thing, is that I don't think you really want to invest in the Los Angeles Rams, but Kupp, if he's healthy and out there playing, is as good as anyone.
Barry, was Jameson Williams' suspension, did that help Amon-Ra St. Brown in the rankings at all? Now there'll be 6 games where it's Amon-Ra pretty much in a high octane passing attack.
It certainly didn't hurt. I mean, you know, I was already high on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, last year, look, he had a 29% target share. Targets are earned in the NFL. And the fact of the matter is that even if Jameson Williams is there, think about it. So, you know, Hawkinson is no longer there. Who else do they have there? Marvin Jones made a return there. They have Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond.
Yeah, they drafted
the rookie
Gibbs
Sam
and Laporta. And
right.
how much do those guys get immediately?
Exactly. So the passing game, and it's a pretty good passing game behind a good offensive coordinator, and Jared Goff, I think, has played above expectations here. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be the focal point of this passing attack. Last year, he had 13 games with 8 or more targets. He averaged 19.3 fantasy points per game in those games. And yes, we expect him to, even when Jameson Williams is out there, Jameson Williams is a speedster. He's not a guy that's going to command 8 to 10 targets a game, I feel like. He's a guy that you take a couple of shots at. You know, he's a guy that's going to be like in the 5 to 6 target range to me. Amon-Ra, coming out of the slot, to me, will continue to have a massive target share and a good offense. He's my wide receiver 7.
All right, let's look at the tight ends to close out your positional rankings. No surprise at the top. Travis Kelce, this is clearly a position group that needs some revamping, needs a rehaul. I'll tell you what, though, Barry, the one that jumps out to me here on this list is absolutely Darren Waller at number 5. We know what he can do when healthy and maybe reinvigorated moving over to Brian Daboll's offense.
So think about this, the New York Giants, right? It was a great season for the Giants last year, and Daniel Jones played well, got rewarded with a big contract, and you're like, well, you know, they're going over to this high-powered passing attack. How's Waller going to get targets? You know who led the Giants in targets last year? Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley had 76 targets last year, which led New York. So they go out and they get somebody like Waller, who's really good at crossing routes, which is where Daniel Jones is the most comfortable throwing, is between the numbers there in the middle of the field. Waller obviously needs to stay healthy, a question, but like he is 4th per yards. He is 4th in yards per route run since 2019, Darren Waller is, again, on a per-game basis. So, yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot of opportunity there because, yes, while there are a lot of pass catchers in New York, there aren't a lot of guys. Like, who knows what you're going to get out of Sterling Shepard or Wan'Dale Robinson or, you know,
Injuries.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that's
you know,
the
like,
theme with them.
yeah, I mean, like, I thought the Jalen Hyatt pick was good, but, like, there is a very real possibility that Darren Waller leads this team in targets and that the passing offense goes through Darren Waller the way in Kansas City it goes through Travis Kelce, the way in Baltimore it goes through Mark Andrews, the way, you know, it potentially could go through TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota, or the way it did go through Hawkinson in Detroit. I mean, obviously Minnesota has Jefferson, but my point is like he could be one of those rare tight ends where the passing offense goes through him.
Yep, and I probably trust Brian Daboll as much as any coach in the league to maximize the talent on his roster because he's also a guy who's not just like, all right, well, we've got Saquon Barkley, so we're just going to run Saquon Barkley 25 times. Like in their last meaningful game of the season, I think Saquon had like 7-9 carries or whatever against the Colts, and they decided they were going to run Daniel Jones. Like they do the smartest thing and they do the best thing, and Waller is probably the most talented pass catcher they have. So no, I think that he's got huge potential.
And also, by the way, they went on and got him.
Yeah.
Like it's a new regime in New York. Last year was their first year. A lot of the guys they inherited, but this is somebody they went out and got. They specifically targeted and they went out and got.
So in front of Waller was Kelce, Andrews, Hawkinson, Kittle. No surprise there. Right after him at 6, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth at 7, Kyle Pitts at 8, 9 was Evan Ingram, 10 was Dalton Schultz. Was there any temptation to try to sneak Dalton Kincaid in here?
Yeah, but I mean the ADP on Dalton Kincaid, especially for people that are doing like best ball drafts,
Getting
is like
insane.
So, you know, like looked at it, but I couldn't justify it. Like, wouldn't shock me if at the end of the year he winds up in the top 10, but hard for me to rank him there. I will say Kyle Pitts. I know people probably see Kyle Pitts on that list and they roll their eyes, but the fact is that he still had a 27% target share last year. It didn't turn into production. You know, touchdowns were still hard to come by for Kyle Pitts. It was a very to be kind, inconsistent passing attack. But hopefully, whether it's Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke, like that's to me what gives you confidence here is again that that Arthur Smith will hopefully design plays to get him the ball. Again, I mean, no tight end had a higher target share than Kyle Pitts, 27%. Adding Bijan Robinson, so now there's another weapon for defensive coordinators to worry about. And if Desmond Ridder is not up to the job, here comes Taylor Heineke. And we can debate whether or not you could actually win an NFL game with Taylor Heineke, whether he's like a, quote, starting caliber NFL quarterback. But we have seen players have very productive fantasy seasons under Taylor Heineke, Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas for moments in Washington as well. Heineke is good enough to get the ball to Kyle Pitts is the point.
He also just throws the ball, which Marcus Mariota often just never did.
Right.
So I think that, that helps Pitts' ceiling and floor.
Yeah, there'll be a short leash on Ridder. Like, if he's not getting the job done, they will turn to Heineke.
Let's quickly read out some of the guys who finished top 10 in PPR scoring among tight ends last season. Tyler Higbee, he was 6th. Cole Kmet was 8th. Taysom Hill was 9th.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that the state of the position looks a little bit better, particularly if someone like Kyle Pitts is going 8th, whereas he was going 3rd last season behind just Kelsey and Andrews.
You asked me about Dalton Kincaid. I'll tell you two guys that I do think are really interesting sort of sleepers at the tight end position. One of whom is who you just mentioned there in Cole Kmet. And the other one I'll just say is we had fun with it towards the end of last year, but my guy, Chig Okonkwo. Okay. I'm telling you, Chig Okonkwo can play.
Oh, okay.
And they don't, other than Treylon Burks, they don't have anyone in Tennessee that's going to demand targets.
Yep.
Yeah, my guy Chig.
Yeah.
Come on now.
All
Chig
right.
Okonkwo.
You just like
Am I
saying
wrong,
his
Connor?
name.
I do.
No,
it took me a while to learn how to say it, so I want to brag.
Yeah.
It's all
If
humble
Dalton
brag.
Schultz was named Chig Okonkwo, we would
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Dalton Schultz a lot more.
No, I'm bear hugging him in Dynasty.
Yeah.
Seriously.
1,000%.
He was a good
Chiggy.
buy low last
Yeah,
year.
get Chiggy with it.
All right, we will do some schedule release takeaways in just a moment, but before we do, the countdown to the Indianapolis 500 continues. Tune into NBC and Peacock on May 28th to find out who's going to kiss the bricks. Barry, another tradition, of course, chugging the milk, as we saw with the winner last year.
So that's Marcus Harrison, my buddy Marcus Harrison, who I interviewed at the Kentucky Derby. Look at that.
Oh, horrific.
He just did 500 miles. Look at that. Indy 500, he just won. He's pouring it all over himself. An unbelievable accomplishment. He won it in the last 2 minutes. Let's go, Marcus Harrison. Absolutely. Pour it all over yourself. To the victor go the spoils. And that's what he earned and did. And so you sit here and you think about, well, Barry, what have you accomplished? What have I accomplished? Because Marcus Harrison just won the Indy 500. You know what I did? I talked on the internet about fake football in the middle of May for like an hour.
Yeah, I had some fried chicken.
So what I really deserve here.
You know, be able to open it? Oh, no.
How are you supposed to get this off? There you
It's
go.
a lift tab.
It's a lift tab. I'm squeezing it in a lift tab.
You're not ready to
but,
win anyway.
A lot of people are like, I poured all over yourself, Barry. Well, no. If I win the Indy 500, you pour it all over yourself. But when you talk fake football on the internet for an hour.
Wow, straw. The straw prop cashes
my
at 10
goodness.
to 1. That's terrifying. Children watch this show.
No. Gave up milk a
You're
while
the
ago.
milkman.
If I won the Indy 500, I would do the wow. The milk chug through the straw.
That's a tough one.
A true champion.
That's a tough one.
I haven't accomplished anything. Pouring it in all seriousness, pouring it on your head should be reserved for the winners when you've accomplished something. What have I accomplished today, Jay Croucher?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
I don't want to hear anything more about my outfit while you're using a straw to drink
Listen,
milk like that.
have I
happened to
accomplished
this
more
thing?
than you? Yes, but that's not saying much, Jay Croucher. I don't deserve to drink straight from the bottle. I don't deserve to pour it on my head.
Truly terrifying sight.
Terrible look.
All right. Well, with that being said,
We should bring back
Watch the Indy 500, May
Yes.
28th, 11 a.m. Eastern, on
bring
NBC
back-
Peacock.
and you can
Kentucky
continue watching the
Derby,
show.
Kentucky Derby vampire outfit to watch you drink milk through a straw.
That would be a sight.
That would really
actually
top it up.
meshes really
Let's bring
well.
it back. No. If Chig Okonkwo has a big game, we'll bring out the
Yeah.
vampire outfit
Yeah,
and
when
the milk
Chig
straw.
Okonkwo has a big game, then I'll go to town.
Yeah, get
but
real
no.
chiggy with the milk.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Real chiggy with the
1,000%.
milk.
But it would be disrespectful to Marcus Ericsson
Yes.
and all the Indy 500 winners that have come before him
Yep.
to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
You don't deserve it.
What am I, Ricky Bobby? Come on, no, stop it. Absolutely
You're not Ricky Bobby.
I'm not Ricky Bobby.
So the NFL schedule officially out here as we go into our last call here, fellas. Jay, some early takeaways from the schedule release.
Yeah, so my early takeaway, it's going to be tough to get through this segment now with the presence
The
of
sound,
the straw.
too, is just
and that
unbelievable.
sound.
I was trying to, because unfortunately the bottle's full. I was
You're
trying to
actually really
get,
drinking
I was trying to get the Slurpee. Like I was trying to get, like the
Yep.
That's too full. Too much milk volume.
yeah, too much milk
Yeah,
volume.
Undone by the volume. I want to talk about the Green Bay Packers and their start to the season,
Sure.
Connor, Matthew. So this is my big takeaway. Look at how the Packers start this year. At Bears, at Falcons, home to Saints, home to Lions, at Raiders, bye, at Broncos, home to Vikings, home to Rams, at Steelers. That is a beautiful schedule for the Green Bay Packers
One
and for
playoff
Jordan
team in the
Love
first
to
10.
get acclimated to his new role in the NFL as a starting quarterback. And so in terms of taking advantage of this, little bet that I like, gentlemen, Matt LaFleur to win Coach of the Year is 20-1 at the moment. I think that Matt LaFleur, he is a guy, in this market, you need to look for who's going to get the credit if they outperform expectations. Because if Andy Reid goes 15-2, he's not
nobody
winning
cares.
Coach of the
Yeah.
Year. If, say, Zach Taylor, if he gets the 1 seed, probably not going to win Coach of the Year because it's so difficult to separate the quarterback performance from the coaching performance when a coach has a superstar quarterback. That's why Matt LaFleur didn't win when Aaron Rodgers was winning MVPs, despite being in the mix. So I think if Matt LaFleur starts off well, if they go 11-6, they win the NFC North, which is very much in play, then I think he can very easily win Coach of the Year. I think he'll get the credit for Jordan Love being good and for keeping him engaged for those years on the sidelines. And so, Matt LaFleur, Coach of the Year.
I really like this call. If you can flash back the schedule one more time, I want to point out one other thing that I think is important here. So the Jordan Love, a lot of the questions are going to be about Jordan Love and this Packers offense that it's the first season without Aaron Rodgers in a billion years. And so, okay, at the Bears, their defense should be better. At the Falcons, okay, whatever. But yeah, home to the Saints, home to the Lions, at the Raiders, on the turf underneath, bye. At the Broncos, Vikings, Rams at home. Like in the first 9 weeks, the only playing at Chicago is tough. Division rival. Playing at Chicago is tough, but it should be good. Playing at should be good weather. At the Broncos, I think that's going to be a little bit tough. But other than that, like it's the tougher defenses, the Rams, the Saints, they're at home in the first 9 weeks. And my point is that one of the points that I made about Jalen Hurts last year was that because there were all these questions coming into the season, can Jalen Hurts be a franchise quarterback? Should the Eagles have drafted a quarterback, et cetera, et cetera? Those are all real things. And I said, one of the points I made is look at their early schedule. It's super easy.
Yep.
And NFL teams, when you start winning, you start getting confidence, and especially the quarterback. This is Jordan Love's first time, and no one knows kind of what are we going to get out of Jordan Love? Having an easy schedule and getting some W's on the board, I think goes a long way for his confidence, for the coaching staff's confidence, for his teammates' confidence, and for all the morons that call sports talk radio and we should never have traded Rodgers, blah blah, whatever. They'll stop those calls if they're winning. So to me, I think that the easy schedule is not only interesting from a betting perspective for LaFleur, but I also think it's really interesting. Jordan Love becomes an interesting quarterback sleeper, and it gives me more confidence if I'm drafting Christian Watson, and the running backs there, right?
Yep.
So
the other thing too is that when you're backing long shots, just in general in betting, you want variance, you want upside, and Jordan Love, he probably won't be amazing, but he could be. We just don't know. We have no idea what Jordan Love is going to look like, and he is a high variance quarterback. The other point that I'll try to make as Matthew continues to sip the milk through the straw is that the Green Bay Packers, they play 6 games in prime time. So Matt LaFleur, if he is doing a good job, he is going to get a lot of attention, a lot of credit. Whereas look at a team like the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith, who they could win a pretty open division as well. They don't play in prime time ever. Whereas Matt LaFleur, he does, and also you got to project forward with this kind of stuff too. Week 17, Sunday Night Football on NBC, Packers, Vikings. Matt LaFleur wraps up Coach of the Year on NBC primetime.
Look at that. I like that
We
call.
will cheers here. And
I like that call. And if that actually happens, then you can chug the milk.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
chug the milk. I'll tip the milk on me.
Yes.
If Matt LaFleur is favorite for Coach of the Year after that game, I'll do it on the show.
It's a good call out, Jay. And on top of that, the Packers plus 400 to win their own division, which is not a
I don't mind
strong
that.
division. I
They
know
still
you've
got a
been
good
on,
roster around
They've been on that as well. For me, guys, from a fantasy angle, when you look at the Falcons schedule, it makes it even easier, if you could believe it, to believe in a massive year for Bijan Robinson. The Falcons by basically every single analytics projection, have the weakest strength of schedule. They are projected to play the weakest schedule in the NFL. And this from the Falcoholic. They have no primetime games, so the schedule is very consistent. No Thursday games, no short week with that. There's no Thursday. 4 of their first 6 games are at home. They have the Week 11 bye, hopefully get Bijan some fresh legs for the fantasy playoffs down the stretch run as well. I think and honestly, the most important thing is you look at the schedule, nothing scares you out of the gate. Panthers, Packers, Lions, Jaguars, Texans, Commanders, Bucks. I think Bijan Robinson is equipped to just have a monster rookie year, and the schedule should only reaffirm that belief.
I don't see a single loss on that schedule. I reckon the Falcons go 17-0. This is unbelievable. The other good thing too is
Week 6.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Week 6.
No. 16-1. They lose to Sam Howell. The other good thing is they play the Jags in London, and then the following week they get to come home and play the Texans. That's good, as opposed to the following week having to go to Arrowhead and play Kansas City. Then it's just an automatic
when you pass on the bye post London. Absolutely. Barry, where are you going?
Yeah, you know what? You know who's a lot of people talk about, who are the losers of the schedule, who are the winners of the schedule. You know who's one of the winners of the NFL schedule?
So Matthew
Us!
Oh.
Us, yes, guys like me, guys like us, fantasy players. Fantasy players. Last year, we looked at the schedule when it came out, and we're like, wait, Week 14? By-Mageddon is Week 14? When we're trying to get into the playoffs the week before the playoffs, or in some leagues where the week the playoffs start, all these teams are on a bye? What are you doing? Was there any consideration given to fantasy football when they made the schedule? Clearly not. This year there was. By-Mageddon is no longer Week 14. It's Week 13. Week 14 is Cardinals and Commanders. Barely any fantasy.
Who cares about those offenses?
Exactly, 1,000%.
You're gonna have to
There'll
bench
be some fantasy relevant players on both those teams, obviously.
Sam
But Week
Howell,
13, Week 13 is where you've got Josh Allen, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Lamar Jackson. So that's going to be a tough quarterback week. By-Mageddon will be Week 13. No Justin Jefferson, no Davante Adams, no Stephon Diggs, right? As you just sort of look there and glance, no Saquon, potentially no Dalvin Cook or Alexander Madison, right? No Josh Jacobs.
Mark Andrews.
Yeah. So, right, By-Mageddon is Week 13, but we can navigate that because a lot of fantasy leagues start their playoffs in Week 15, or even if it's 14, you can deal with that. So, yes, we are winners.
America wins.
America wins.
Planet Earth wins.
Yes.
Fantasy's global.
And with that, fellas, that's a wrap on today's show.
How great would it be, in all seriousness, how great would it be is if whoever wins the Indy 500 this year, they pull out a straw.
Yeah,
and they suck it.
They cheers to you. I learned this from Fantasy Football Happy Hour, Matthew
Actually,
Barry.
NBC told me the winner was going to do that, but then they watched this show today, and now the straw's out. Yeah,
Fair.
The straw's out forever.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them. Well, listen, you know what, guys? It's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Jay Croucher, Connor Rogers, I'm Matthew Barry, sipping milk to the winner's circle. We'll see you next week. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Barry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.